Press the button.
When you do you want to do a countdown?
Is that okay?
403.
Sorry, 403.
Sorry.
And start.
Hello, my name is Kitoko Mai. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a multidisciplinary storyteller based here in Hamilton. Welcome to our event, Community in Conversation. I have Sedina with me, who will introduce themselves in a moment. But first, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. So we're located in Hamilton. The land we're on is on the traditional territories of the Erie, the Neutral, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. The territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Agreement, an agreement made between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe and other allied peoples to share and care for the lands around the Great Lakes. So Sedina,
Yes.
can I ask you to introduce yourself and maybe talk about your relationship to the land?
Oh, sure. Yes, I am a producer, a creator, a director, a performer for stage and screen. Also facilitator and activist, even though it's always weird to say that I do activism. I'm just like, I went to school for it. I did not. Yes, and my relationship to this land, I'm glad to be visiting known as Hamilton today. But I'm born and raised in Tkaronto, which is, a Mohawk word where the trees stand tall in the water. And, I feel like with these land acknowledgements, a question, the practice of it, I think, is always just a good space to meditate, think about like what land we're on, our relationships to Indigenous people, and like overall Indigenous solidarity. It's a little tricky as a person of African descent, as we think about what that means. We're not like a traditional settler, but we're still like uninvited guests, so there's still, meanwhile, there is such a great history of Indigenous and Black solidarity. It's still a relationship that I think I personally have to navigate, and we all have to. So, yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting to hear, as you know, like the theme of this series is like decolonizing your artistic practice, and that like obviously aligns with like Indigenous like sovereignty and like showing up for Indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what decolonization means to you. As well as a two-part question, what it means for you to like decolonize your artistic practice.
Yes, okay, well, decolonizing, taking away the colonizing, but yeah, I think more concretely, when we talk about colonization, we know the word can mean many things, but I think within a North American context, what we're talking about is the long process of people, mainly from Western Europe, coming to various lands, what we now call North and South America and the Caribbean and other places all over the world. But since this is where we are, this is where we are. So to decolonize my practice is real deep because like my mother is from Trinidad and my father's from Ghana, and they met in Toronto. And so they're both from colonized places too. So to be Black, to be a person proudly of African descent and to claim that, and then to be an artist on top of that is like, there are really big questions about like where I'm from, what art am I doing, why, those are huge questions. And for me, I think if we're trying to decolonize, we're trying to undo the harmful effects of colonization, because we can't go back in time, even though I wish we could. We can't go back in time, but it's a question of like, okay, what do we have now? What are we going to keep? What are we going to let go of? Because the process of colonization is so deep, and it's like hundreds of years old, and it's like it's more than reparations. It's so many things. It's like actually like an internalized way of doing things, an internalized way of seeing the world. And as a person of African descent, it's so important to do that work, because if I internalize the way that the world sees me, I'm not going to want to live, because the world sees me as a Black woman, as somebody who is not valuable, somebody who's not attractive, somebody who is not smart, or if I am, it should be used in service in a particular way. Especially like even navigating the world as someone with ADHD, someone who's like not, I've certainly like failed in many ways. I've certainly failed, I have, and I really, and people like not believing in me, not believing in my abilities, not believing that I'm worth anything. So this process is deep for me, because it's just like, where did those ideas come from about who is worthy, who is good, who's not, and how do I let them go? And even within the training that I've had, like I went to the University of Windsor for music theater, and I went to the Etobicoke School of the Arts. I was always taught by white people. Like, I've been taught by white people my whole life. And so what did they teach me? You know what I mean? And how does that resonate with who I am, with my background? What are those methods and what are those methodologies? And do we need to keep them? What do we keep? What do we let go of? So yeah, it's a deep process. And I would say it has so much to do with, like, for me, around like knowledge, gaining knowledge, sharing around my own background, my own histories, as well as knowing the harmful histories, and then also being on this land, you know, Turtle Island, you know, Canada, whatever we want to call it, being on this land and the many nations that are here, and what knowledges they have to share, what do they need from us, is always that question. And that, even the gaining of that knowledge is such a lifetime thing, you know what I mean? And it is just a lifetime thing to decolonize your practice. But yeah, I think it's just so much about knowledge and unlearning, and really interrogating what we've learned, and what it means, and who came up with these ideologies, why do we have them, are they useful, are they leading us toward joy, are they leading us toward like our collective liberation, and if they're not, then why are we still doing them? Yeah. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I love that. We love it and hate it. Like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. It makes me think of the conversation I had yesterday with Lisa, and for folks online, like, I definitely encourage you to like go watch that conversation. It's still available. She talked about how within theater, there's like a lot of like almost like recolonizing that happens.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. And she also her opinion is that maybe decolonization can't happen. And I'm curious about your thoughts on these things. I might be like misquoting a little bit, but.
Oh, for sure. And I'm gonna watch all the conversations.
Yeah,
oh my goodness, they're all great. Such great people that have been chosen, and I feel very honored to be here. Amongst them, amongst all of them. Yes, I think the process of the way that I've learned to do theater certainly can be a recolonizing. Because truthfully, I came to the theater, I came to the arts in a space of joy and excitement. My first introduction to the arts truly was with my father, who was from Ghana, and he had like this Ghanaian dance troupe, and he was an activist in and of himself as well, and he had this dance troupe, and anybody was welcome, and mainly people from the Black diaspora were the people who did it, but like even people who weren't from Ghana, he was like, I learned from others. He was like, come, like I'll share for you what I know from being from Ghana, you know what I mean? And so we go around all these different community centers performing, and me and my sister would just like be around, you know what I mean? And even since then, I was like 4 or 5, I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that, and that continued, you know what I mean, throughout, and then it grew since then. But like, yes, I've always wanted to be an artist. Like, I thought it was something that you could do, even if I didn't exactly know how. My dad died when I was quite young, so I hope he's proud of me. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. And I have another story about that, but another time. But anyway, yeah, I think, so that was my introduction to the arts. And then over time, yeah, watching TV, come on, fame, like any number of things. I was like, and I remember also a great story. Like I was a girl guide in Rexdale, Ontario, if you know, you know, and it's like north of Etobicoke, North Toronto, in their suburbs, and like my there was someone in my girl guide company who was on Road to Avonlea. Her name was Heather Brown, and she played Izzy Pettibone on that show, and I was like, oh my god, you could be on TV, like you can do that, and I was like, wow, like it seems so outside my realm, and various staffs led me to Etobicoke School of the Arts. So this is like the impetus of my work is so much about like yeah, this is going to be great. And then I started to get deeper into things, and it's just like, is it great? That joy is still there. Oh my god, it's always still there, but it is tempered with okay, because the way that especially like in theater school, it just was like joyless. You know, like it just was like you have to work hard and you suck. Like that was kind of the thing, and I wasn't working hard enough or doing well enough. Like let's be clear about that. Like that I did not fit that mold. I also just didn't even feel like I wanted to work hard. You know what I mean? I just was like, what is this? Like, why are we doing this? Like I had a lot of questions, and I did it anyway, but like I wasn't happy. And I always thought I did this work to be happy, like, and not to say that to shy away from any sort of rigor. It wasn't about that, but I just was like, isn't this like supposed to be fun? Like, if it isn't fun, why are we doing it? And like thinking through like my own background in terms of like as an artist, and thinking through my father and in Ghana, and even in the Trinidadian side, both sides, it's like art as a person of African descent is more than like this rigorous tradition. It's just like woven into our lives, our everyday lives. We should dance for any number of reasons. You know what I mean? We should make music any number of reasons. We should be artful with our clothes, artful with the way we cook. You know what I mean? Like it's woven in, and there is a sense of like something about it that's beyond just needing to fit a particular mold. So anyway, that is, I definitely feel like, you know, in terms of the way that theater was taught at that time, to the industry's credit, I really do think things are changing, and I have been working with Windsor even to like look at how they're changing things, and other places, other teachers, there's a new generation of teachers who are really thinking through how we teach, you know, and what do we teach, because the way that they gave it to us, it was like, okay, this is how you do things. You do scene study, you do these things, you do voice, you do movement, and you do Shakespeare, you do the classics, and you know, you want to be at the top of your craft, and all of these things, right? And underlying it was just like how to be the best, or whatever they feel like the best might be, instead of like the space of like how to just explore it for the sake of exploring it. But I do think there are some things that are useful in terms of my training. As an example, like I'll always rely on voice, like in terms of being able to like breathe and be in touch with your body, and principles of movement are all really great things. And even like principles of like deconstructing scenes, if that's kind of the way you want to go about things, that's all really useful stuff. But I think it was less about, it was the content, which can change. But for me, even if the content changes and the process doesn't change, then it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? And sometimes we have those conversations of like, okay, we just need more representation of people. You're like, do we need more representation? Or do we actually need to change entirely of the paradigm, you know? And I'm of that school of thought.
Changing the paradigm.
Yeah, just shift the paradigm entirely. You know, like, why are we doing this again? Why are we doing this to what end? Process is important, you know what I mean? Like, process is deeply important. It doesn't, and a big thing about white supremacy and how it shows up in theater is just like this, we forget about process entirely, right? Like, it's all about the product, the show must go on, all of those kinds of ideas and ideologies, you know what I mean? Which mean that the human part is taken away. And the human part is actually, in my opinion, the most important. But yeah, can we decolonize? We can. And the way that I think of activism on a whole is that we, you know, in our lifetimes, I don't think we can undo 400 years, 500 years of harm. But I think we can all chip away at it. You know what I mean? We can be like close the door on further doing it and look at how we heal, how we heal individually and how we heal collectively. And so, yes, one professor at one school isn't like good at decolonize the, and I don't think that that's a realistic goal. But I think that there are things that each of us, in that case, the professor or teacher, can do to look at, okay, how can I rehumanize this process? How can I let my students walk away with something that's really valuable? And I'm really proud of your generation, Kitoko. I'm actually really proud of you because I've known you for a few years now. And yeah, you're doing great work. I'm really proud of you all continuing to challenge things. And the reason why I think a lot of you are able to do that is because even parents, teachers, etc., people have said you should do that. You know what I mean? And I hope that like those of us who are holding space for the next generation while still trying to take care of ourselves, but that we can continue to give you all the space to continue to push back, because that's the process. You know what I mean? Like I think I've heard someone say, and it's very true, that like decolonizing is a process. It isn't gonna, it's like snap your fingers and it's done. I think it's just an ongoing thing that we all have to commit to, you know? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're so smart.
So are you!
Thank you. Can you kind of talked about it, but can you give a concrete example from like your own artistic practice that where it was like what you were talking about, like focusing on process instead of the product and bringing like the human element back?
Yes. To be honest, the best ways that I've been able to do this is really as a producer, a big time, because as an actor, and as a producer and a director has a lot more, the way this process is set out now has a lot more power in the process. As an actor, the way that I deal with things often is just like, I haven't acted for theater in a while. I've been thinking about it and I missed it, but I'll get back to it when I'm ready. And but like for me, that has to be the choice of project, because I want to make sure that people that I'm working with are going to make a human process, and that's how I help to protect myself. So there's certain things I probably won't do, because I'm just like, I don't care how amazing it is. Like I don't want to work with those people.
Yeah, that's right.
I just don't, and because even if the product's gonna be, oh my god, it's gonna be, it just doesn't even matter if it's gonna like. If I know that the cost of it is going to be my mental health, then it's just not worth it for me. So I'm really mindful of who I'm working with. That's how I protect myself as an actor, because there's just less power that you have. You have a lot of power over yourself, but acting is one of those things, and performance on a whole is one of those things that is very like, it is about the individual contributing to the whole, but it's like I have to take care of myself in order to contribute positively to whatever project we're creating, you know? I mean, the same could be said for everybody, but like there's a certain amount of like, I have to learn, learn my whatever I have to learn in terms of like whatever I'm presenting, and I have to ask the questions and be in the room, that kind of thing. That's the job of the actor or the job of the performer. The job of the producer and director is to create the space, right? So that for me is a space where it's a lot easier to look at, okay, how can I humanize things, especially as the producer, because it's like, even on a tiny indie project, you're like, okay, what's our budget here? Budgeting is huge. Like it sounds boring, but it isn't. Like if we don't have the money to do things, then nothing is going to happen. And you can't, it's really hard to fix things after the fact. It's just so hard. So budgeting is huge, and also just like who's in the space, and like that configuration of people is also huge. You know what I mean? The like sort of casting, and more than just like the performers, but like casting everybody who's going to be in the space, like how everyone's going to work together, and the values that people are bringing. So yeah, I think when thinking about like sort of decolonizing practice more like in a very concrete way, it definitely looks like it starts with the values for me. It's like, and I say values, I mean like what's important to you. What's important, like as an example, if it's important that this production has ASL interpretation, which is a very concrete example, it's like, okay, how are we going to do that? You know what I mean? Where's the money? Who are the people? As an example. Or if it's important, like something that's come up a lot in theater, thankfully, and balancing acts been doing this work, if it's important for people to have childcare, you know what I mean, or have that covered, okay, we put this in the budget, or we figure it out. There's even Oh my goodness. I hope she won't be angry for telling me. I'm sure she won't. But like, there was a time I was doing this indie production, and like, we arranged for childcare, but it kind of didn't go through. I was just like, okay, I'll keep an eye on your kid. So I was like, Aviva. It was Aviva Amor Asram. I literally went down to her house, hang out with her wonderful child, and it was like, I'll do it, because the arrangement that we had just didn't work out in that moment. So I was like, no problem, I will do it. And like, it was enjoyable for me. I love children, so it was no problem. But like, that kind of thing where I'm just like, because she said, she was very clear, because she's such a strong person and a strong artist, and she just was like, look, I have my child this time, and like, I can only do this project if childcare is covered in some way. If you support me in this, then I can do it. If you can't, too bad. Like, I'm saying no. So I was like, no, we'll do it. We'll figure it out. You know what I mean? So like, it's stuff like that where, and then even just looking at like the kinds of processes we do, you know? So it's just like, if there's a group of people working together and it's like, okay, we all kind of have day jobs, or we're all like juggling all kinds of things, it's like, okay, do we come up with like a rehearsal process that honors that? Like, for instance, like working with Switch Collective, and us being like sitting down and figuring out, okay, what's a process that's going to work for everybody, that's going to take into account all the different commitments that we have, but designing the process, you know what I mean? Like, really being intentional about designing what the process is going to be, so that, you know, it honors everything that we need it to honor, you know? So yeah, those are some concrete examples. I mean, I do this stuff a lot, as you know, I hope, as some.
Yeah, I do. I do.
I spent time with you in the Generator APT program, but yeah, we talked about it a lot. You know what I mean? It's just like, for all of you who are in that program, just being like, really just the biggest thing I want anyone to walk away with is like, what's important to me? How can I fight for those things, or how can I make those things happen in terms of what's important to my heart? That's if people walk away with that, that's enough. Whether you know how to use Excel, well, who knows? Like, it's okay. You don't have to. But like, it's that, like, those concrete skills, whichever. But like, if your heart is aligned and you believe that, like, the things that you believe in can happen, then that's like, the job is like done, as far as I'm concerned. You know, like, we're in a really good space. It's not always easy, but at least you know what's important to you, and so if you're going to compromise on it, you know you've compromised on yourself, and that's okay. Sometimes that happens, you know, but at least you are aware. For me, like, I just didn't even know that I could advocate for myself. Because of the way that I was trained, the messages that I was getting, it just was like, oh, I can say no to things, or I don't have to do this, or I don't have to like work all the time and develop this huge body of work to prove myself, you know, like, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned activism a couple times, like advocating for yourself, and I'm curious about whether you feel like you were forced into activism because of your identity and trying to like navigate the industry for yourself, or is that something that you feel like you have taken for, like, being an activist?
I think it's both. I think I've certainly been forced into it, in the sense that it became very clear to me after graduating theater school and like making my way in the world, that things were very unfair. I just was like, this is not fair, this is not good, this is not right. You know what I mean? So I ended up doing that because I wanted things to change. However, just to be queer for a minute, there is also, I feel like, astrologically, I have like sun in Aries and moon and rising in Cancer. So I feel like that might be the profile of an activist right there, because it's like, I have a lot of feelings, you know what I mean? And for me, my tolerance for suffering is low.
Yeah, same.
Tolerance for my own suffering and tolerance for the suffering of people around me is low. And so seeing a world that is set up for people to unnecessarily suffer is what drives me. So I don't know that I was like born an activist, but I certainly was born having a lot of empathy, and then living in this world ends up being like, oh, why are things this way when they don't have to be? Then you're like, oh, okay. Then I learned more about why that is, and then it's like, oh, okay, I can be a part of changing them. Great, because the world as it stands it would be a lot for me to turn off all of the like sensitivities that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of artists have. I think that's part of what being an artist is about, is having that like higher sense of just empathy for the world. I do, even no matter what artist, it's just like, that's why you are, like, you need to express, you need to put something out in the world because you feel and you see, and therefore you translate that into whatever medium is right for you. But that's why I find anyway, a lot of artists are activists, because we really are looking at the world and being like, why is it like this? There's something up here. There's something wrong here that it should be like this. So yeah, some combination of the two. It's like, if I didn't have to do activism, what would I do with my time is a really good question. And I guess I would still be an artist. But maybe I would always be one of those people who needs to stand up for myself and others, you know? I don't know.
Would you ever let yourself become a celebrity activist?
No. No. I mean, it may end up being that way, who knows, but it's certainly not my goal. I think I'm still, what keeps me from ever going down that path is that I'm still an artist. Like, I'm still an art, like, I have to remind people, I have to remind myself half the time, but I'm still making art. Like, I still actually want to be an artist first. You know what I mean? The activism is a means to an end so that things are better. I want to see things be better. I don't need to be the person to make them better, but I believe that I can with other people. You know what I mean? Like, it's, together, all of us who are like, things need to shift, like, we'll come together and put our energies toward making things shift. And also, like, I stand on the shoulders of other people who did activism, so I'm here. You know what I mean? Clearly, people who are still alive who, like, Audrey Zina Mandela, or like Philip Aiken, or like Amma Harris. Like, I can name people specifically who I know, Sandy Ross is, you know what I mean? Like, who I know did that activism in the 80s, 90s, Jenny Hold on, another one, many, who did that, so that the things that I'm capable of doing, they pushed for. So I push for things, and it'll be a part of another generation of people who are able to do even better. So yes, but the art comes first. Like, the art comes first, because that's really what I want to do. And so I want to see things do better. This isn't about me needing to be the face of it. It's about things being better. Yeah. That's what's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Earlier, before we started the live stream, I asked you what's present for you in this moment. I'm going to ask it again. What's present for you in this moment? What's present? Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about leaderful movements. And this, you know what? It's funny, because Black Lives Matter said it. Black Lives Matter America said it years ago, because they're like, I feel like maybe there was something around Occupy, just to bring it back, like, bring it way back, where they said it was like a leaderless movement, which I think is a good thing. But Black Lives Matter kind of flipped it, and they were like, we're a leaderful movement, which I love even better. I think, Octavia Butler talked about this in her books. But this idea as humans that we need hierarchy. Do you know what I mean? Or we need to celebritize people. We need to put people on a pedestal. I'm curious about that need and wanting it to not be a need anymore. Like, it's okay, of course, we need leadership, but do you need to look to leadership for the answers, or are the answers inside of you? So I think of that in terms of like independent artists, which I'm like really want to fight for, because I've lived it, and we need to do much, much better, much better. And I think of it as just like, don't look to anyone else. Like, we there might be information, but like, what can you do? What can each individual person do to push things forward, and believing that you have, as an individual, do have the power to do better in your own way, and therefore you're also a leader too. You know, that we're all leaders in our own right. And so if that's the case, then we are full. And so if someone, it's also really important, even just for looking at capacity and avoiding burnout, and like being like, okay, if someone's not able to do something, that's okay, somebody else can pick it up. You know what I mean? So that it's not reliant on the energy of a few people to do everything, or a few people to keep everybody inspired. How do we keep ourselves inspired, and how do we believe that we
each individual person has like a role to play in making things better. As somebody also who like loves to hear from celebrities, not all of them, obviously. Like there's a bunch I don't care about, but like the ones who do put themselves out there, like an Oprah, certainly, an Oprah or Brene Brown. Like I love those folks. But at the same time, it's funny what I take away from what they're saying is just like, okay, yes, I suppose you could keep buying O magazine, but like, you know, there's certainly a capitalist element to it. But at the same time, I'm also like, what if the message is, you don't need Oprah, she's just giving you the tools to do better in your life. You know what I mean? Like, what if that's the message instead of being like, oh my God, Oprah's amazing. But it's like, what if I'm amazing because I listen to her? You know what I mean? Like,
oh, cool.
Food for thought. So yes. And I think I was talking to you about this right before too, this, I've just seen some celebrity activism not go very well.
Right.
As in the sense that there's people who, frankly, in my opinion, some of whom are narcissists and who just wanted power and was able to use community and activism to gain that, wanted power, wanted exposure, and they got that. But then where, you know, they kind of left a mess in their wake. And so it was an important lesson for me as someone who looks up to certain people. I did it. I was like, oh, so has the answers. So knows so much. And I believed in these, and then it's like, as time goes on, I was like, do they know? What are they doing right now? Like, is this in line with our values here? Like our collective values? I thought this was about making change, not about you elevating yourself on the backs of other people. And that's kind of how it has unfolded. And in fact, we can probably see this in many, like I'm talking specifically about like queer activism in Toronto, and if people know, they know. I don't need to name names. But it plays out in many different areas of life, and even just thinking of like the lessons to be learned from the civil rights movement that Ed's talking to you about, and like the government literally assassinating people. Okay, maybe the government not, but you know, there's so many conspiracy theories about why certain people were very visibly killed, and then what that did for movements. You know what I mean? And the movements continued, of course they did, but I think an important message is that we can't hold somebody up to say that this person has all the answers or this person is our sole inspiration, because if that person goes down for any number of reasons, then where are we? You know what I mean? The movement can't rely, movements, plural, can't be on the shoulders of one or a few people. We all need to take a piece, and we all need to be responsible, and we all need to keep pushing forward, whether those folks are there or not, you know? Yeah.
Do you feel the same is true for like theater organizations or arts organizations?
Yes. Yes. Big time. I mean, I think I'm really interested in the way that theater in particular is set up, and I know it so well because I'm in it all the time, and like the cult of the artistic director, right? As a model, like people just kind of taken it to be like the artistic director, and it's like, and then the whole company is now like oriented toward the artistic director. When they leave, their ideas leave, and a new person comes in, and now it's the artistic. So I just food for thought around that. Like, what do we gain from that model? And it's funny, like, just to be so honest as well, like, a lot of people want that job. They're like, why won't you be the artistic director? And I'm like, but why? And when we break it down, because it's not artistic, child. Like, I've seen it. It's not an artistic job. It's partly artistic. It's creative. It's you curate, certainly. And maybe, in the case of some people, the way it turns out, you might get to direct one show in the season. You might. And the rest of it is a lot of meetings and admin and talking to donors and funders and a lot of meetings. A lot of meetings and a lot of emails. And I'm just like, so what is artistic about this job again? Like, why is it so great? And I think people want it because it's in an industry that doesn't give anyone any validation in the world, that says that theater doesn't matter, or like people don't even know or care what we do. To say that you're an artistic director is to be like, I made it in the world. I am worthy. You know, people answer to me, and it's just like, okay, but that's not. Yeah, great, great for you. How about everybody else? You know what I mean? And so yeah, that particular model, I have questions about it. I have questions about it in terms of like, is it really serving the art? Is it really serving an organization to be like, okay, this is the leader, you know what I mean? This is the person who is deciding the artistic direction of of the organization. What would it mean to look at different models? What would it mean, especially from a feminist perspective, what would it mean to look at more co-curative models? You know, I have thoughts about that, or to share the power in a particular way. Like, what would that mean? What would that look like? It's a good question, and a part of like decolonizing the practice, because even that sort of thing, because it just leads to two. Again, it's just like it becomes about one person, and not to say that I don't want to demonize anybody, because I don't think that a lot of artistic directors necessarily see themselves that way. I think a lot of people do, some who do end up with the job, they want it because they do think, okay, if I'm in a position of leadership, I can do better. Which they can, you know, they can do the best they can, but the model itself is a bit flawed. And even just the nonprofit model as a means to art making, I don't even think it's the right model, but we're kind of stuck with it, so we do the best we can.
You mean like having a board and all that?
Yeah, like what? Like, what is this? How did that happen? But we know how it happens, right? I talked to Jane Marsland, who's an older, she's in her 70s, I think, and she's, she's a consultant and been around for a long time. And yeah, I talked to her about it. I was like, how did we end up here? And she was just like, oh, well, basically the non-profitization of the arts, it kind of started in the 70s and 80s, and it became the model. But if you notice, like in the last, like, I don't know, say 25 years, let's say maybe not 20, like maybe the last 10, 15 years, nobody is starting a nonprofit theater company. Why? Because it's not the right thing to do. Because it's a lot of work, and now you're stuck with this administrative burden of a company instead of making the art, which is what we all want to do. Right? So yes, I think we have it now, so like it's not going anywhere, and it's like an entrenched system, but I don't feel like it's the system of the future. I don't, and if it is, it has to look different than it does now, because I don't really think it's serving artists. I don't, to a certain extent, I guess it's serving audiences, but I don't deeply believe that it is doing what it's set up to do. I feel like it's a part of a system that is very colonial. You know what I mean? That's very colonial, and that we need to really examine how it works. Even just the nonprofit, like minus the nonprofit arts organization, just even nonprofit as a system is just like, why do we have this? Right? Isn't the government supposed to be doing these things? You know what I mean? And just like, oh, but now these nonprofits are, and then it's set up in a particular way. Now you have to have a board, and even within the board, like that particular colonial construction of being like, oh, we have to have an accountant on our board, we have to have a lawyer on our board, we have to have an HR specialist so that we can get these things for free or for less money, right? Like, and then it's like oftentimes who can afford to even be on a board. A lot of artists can't afford to be on a board, and then if you're on the board of an organization, it means you can't take any money from it in terms of, because it's nonprofit charitable. So then you're now cutting yourself off from opportunities, and then you have less say sort of in the like big picture decision making of things. So it just was like, wow, okay. So and oftentimes people, for some organizations, depending, especially the small ones, they're like begging people to be on their board, right? They're like, please, like we gotta find people to be on our board. And then for the larger ones, the larger legacy organizations, it's easy for them because being on the board has a certain type of prestige for the people who are on it, right? There's a social capital. But so what, and in the end, what any of this has to do with making art? None of it. It's all this added admin structure and system that really doesn't have anything to do with art making beyond the fact that, okay, this is how we get the money. So it just is like, so why are we doing it again? Like, who is it benefiting? It's certainly not benefiting the artists, I'll tell you that much. And it's so anyway, end of thoughts. End of those thoughts.
Sounds like it just pushes you further and further away from the community.
Yeah, it can.
And like silences them in some ways.
It does. And then it's like, especially artistic directors, I'm sure so many of them would much rather even just be out like watching shows and connecting with artists, but then they have this like stack of admin to do. So it's this dance they have to do, and they do the best they can with it. But yeah, it is a balance that they have to strike that they don't strike. I'm sure many of them would much rather be spending more time doing the art, curate all kinds of things than like having to work with the boards and the fundraising and the grant writing and all of that. But that's the job, you know.
You said this a couple times about like this idea of like working so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like working hard is sort of like a colonial myth?
Yes. 100%. I believe in rigor, and I believe in rigor. Like I believe in like having a goal and working hard to achieve it. I believe in that, you know. I do, and I believe in, as an artist, like practicing what you do. You know what I mean? Like practicing and getting better at it, whatever that means. It's a lifetime thing. But that's like a little bit different than like working hard or the performativeness of that. It's a colonial construct, and it's like internalized within us, and it goes back to slavery, really. Like it's deep. It's really deep. Because even in Western European societies, the idea of having to work to live it wasn't always there. It actually wasn't always there. Like even there it wasn't. You know, in terms of like, we live in a village, we all have our spaces, we all figure out our food situations, and then it's like the serfdom thing happened in terms of Western European culture, and then like that, they spread that all over the world. But it isn't necessarily the way that we need to live. So if you remove needing to earn money, remove capitalism just to get like, then what would we do with our time, right? Like we would do things that we would need to do that maybe require a lot of effort, but we could do them in a more sustainable way, right? No, I don't believe in working hard, because the thing is with that is that I believe in rigor, and I believe in like the space of being like, I like something so much that I'm like absorbed in it, especially as someone with ADHD. Hyper focused. You're like, sweet, I'm like hyper focused on this task, which is very enjoyable for me, for my mind and heart. It's very enjoyable to be absorbed into something that you feel really good about doing. But the volume is really what I have the issue with. It's like having to do so much. You know what I mean? And the valuing of that, of being like, oh, that's good that you did so much. And then there's people in the world and then we value those who don't have to do a lot because other people are doing it for them. Right? Like, what is that? What is that, right? Like, we're just like, oh, so-and-so, it's like all about outsourcing and all of this jazz, like these billionaires who we all know they wouldn't have that money if there weren't all these other people working to make them have that money or make them have those resources. And yet we put these people on a pedestal because they've basically figured out how to game hack capitalism. And it's just like, what's that about? So no, I believe we should work. We should do work. Work is good. And when it feels good, it's fun, it feels good. But like, when it goes beyond the point of feeling good and our hearts, our minds, our bodies are being harmed, or we don't have time to see the people that we love, then really what's the point? Like, what's the point? Like, if we don't have time for ourselves, the people that we love, and if we become stressed out, anxious people who are imposing that on other people, then I'm sorry, I didn't realize life was supposed to be so miserable. Like, that's what I'll say about that. But that's like, honestly, I got into an argument with my sister about it. She was like, what do you mean you have to work? I was like, we have to work. Come on now. I was just like, yeah, but like, does it need to be this? Like, does it need to look like this? You know?
Yeah. I feel like it's important to be able to imagine other like ways that we could live. It doesn't have to be like this.
No.
And we have the power to try and like make it different.
Totally.
Yeah. We're at 4:46.
Okay, sweet.
I just want to open it up to questions from people.
We don't have a huge audience here, but there might be online too. Yeah. But I'm glad for who's here.
Yeah. But if there are no questions, I have like a bunch.
Yep.
Silence is good. It doesn't have to be awkward. It could be nice. When we were talking earlier, you said this phrase, and I would like to hear you like expand on it. You said, like, how do we all get free? Your turn.
How do we all get free?
Yeah,
Okay.
how do you think we could all get free?
It's true. Okay.
What does that even mean?
Totally. I believe we are not entirely free now because I will say, as someone assigned female at birth, you know, who identifies with womanhood in various ways, I am glad that we are more free than we used to be. I'll say that much. Like, even in my mother's lifetime, my mom's like, she's gonna be 73 this year, so 74. But yeah, within her lifetime, women couldn't open a bank account without like a man's signature. So it was just like woohoo, you know. And the fact that now like things like intimate partner violence is seen as wrong. You know what I mean? Like there's been like all kinds of things have happened where I feel like, thinking of my ancestors, like I'm certainly more free than some of them were, which feels really good. I have to just like say that out loud. But as a society, are we free? No. And I think for me, I say that because I feel like freedom would look like people really being able to exercise their gifts in this world. I believe everybody has multiple gifts in different areas in this world. Freedom would mean that we could spend time with the people we love, spend time doing the things we enjoy doing, spend time even just on the mundanity of the, you know, activities of daily living. You know what I mean? And making our own stuff. I don't know, this like feminist utopia was fine, I'll put it out there. Making our own stuff, or not even feminist, like thinking of the way my ancestors lived, you know, and like moving, like a lot of life was like, okay, we're preparing for ceremonies, we're preparing for different festivals, stuff like that. Like that is what life's about. Someone has a baby, somebody dies, you know, we celebrate, we mourn, we live. Freedom, and we do all those things, but there is this like framework of capitalism that I feel like just casts a shadow over it all, because it's like we try to fit in all those things with also like work. There's this thing around work, and we have this relationship to work for money, whether you can do it, whether you can't do it. And it's just like we're always, even myself, like going to therapy, I spent so much time in therapy talking about work, and my therapist was like, okay, what do you do outside of work? I'm like, oh, what? Like, it's taken me a long time, but it's true. Like, I orient things around, like, getting stuff done that pays me money or that brings me whatever. So if you were to just take that away, then I feel like everyone's so much freer to do the things they really want to do. And then on some level, we at least saw like a tiny glimpse of it in the pandemic, right? We talked about that, where we're like, oh, I have more time on my hands. What do I really want to do? You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to bake. I'm going to, you know, walk around with my neighbor. I'm going to do any number of things that I feel like are probably more oriented to like what humans like should do, like what humans actually have been evolved to do. So yeah, that's why I feel like we're not free. So for all of us to get free, it would be to stop believing that that capitalism is actually working for us, and start believing in something else that could be better, or at something else that could be better, that could be like not stressful, not anxiety producing, actually being able to be more human in a way. That for me was what I feel like freedom looks like. And I don't even think that there's one paradigm. I think there's like multiple paradigms that it could be, but I know that it isn't now, because it's just like, there is this like the shadow of money, of capitalism that is over all of our lives. And even rich people, even people who are generationally wealthy, they also have to put effort into maintaining that wealth. It's so funny. It's not a world that I live in, but they too have to be like, where am I going to put my investments? How am I going to manage my family foundation? Like literally, and so they hire other people to do that, whatever, but they actually still have to think about money. You know what I mean? And so what would it mean for us not to have to think about it? Not to say that there wouldn't be some systems of trade, things like that, but like what would it look like to remove that, and who would we be? And that's the question, and that's why I'm like, that's how we get free. It's just like truly, the more we disinvest from capitalism, the more that we invest in ourselves, in our own health, and the health of those around us, is, I think, the happier we will be as humans, just because there's just so much suffering in the world that's just so silly, and it's just not even needed. I don't even mean to say silly, it diminishes it, but it just really isn't needed, and like,
it's avoidable.
It really is avoidable. The wars and the homelessness, all kinds of things that we experience. And at base level too, these are my ideas. Fine, probably borrowed from any number of other people. But at base level, I do believe that humans, to be human is to suffer. Like, to get philosophical.
Oh, dang.
At a level it is. Like, we're gonna be born. We're not always gonna get along with everybody. People are going to die that we love. You know what I mean? It's just, things are going to die that we love. Things may not go the way we want them to do. That's just the base human experience. Everyone's going to experience that.
Right.
Nobody escapes that. No one. No one escapes losing someone they love. And that grief. You know, absolutely nobody in this world is ever going to escape that. So if that's the base level, that's to be human, is to experience those things, what's all this other stuff? What's all this other stuff that's just not even needed anyway? So like, it's huge to say out loud, and I know I sound like such a radical, but that's okay. Me and the other radicals, all you all who are watching this and listening, like, we all can hang out and have these philosophical conversations, because to be human is just to suffer, and also to experience joy, and to experience everything in between. That's base. All the other things, like, what are those, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like people really hold on to things like capitalism. I feel like there's a lot of fear when you say, like, let's abolish it. Let's get rid of it.
Yeah. How are we going to live, right?
Yeah.
How are we going to live? It's like, well, if you don't have to pay for your home, who's going to take, like, how are we going to get food? Like, it's really, really good questions. But there are actually societies that don't live with capitalism anyway. I mean, they have to, but we actually can go and experience places where it isn't a thing.
Yeah.
Or their relationship to it is a lot different, you know?
Yeah. I wonder if you've ever experienced any, in your journey, if you've ever experienced any fear over, like, accepting a new idea, and, like, how you've been able to move through it, or if you've just always been like, yep.
No, I've had to accept all kinds of new ideas, and I just want to be so clear. Yeah, I've held really oppressive views, for sure. Definitely. Like, if you'd asked me 14, 15 years ago, I didn't have anything good to say about, like, or anything worthwhile anyway about, like, trans identity as an example, or being queer, like, all of those things. I didn't know them, you know what I mean? And I had to learn, and even, like, polyamory, like, if I was like, what? Like, to be fair, I've been open to that for a long time. But still, like, all kinds, just as an example of ideas. Or even that if you told me that gender was a social construct as an idea, or race was a social construct, I'd be like, what? Like, what are you? And I can say these things now, but I've learned, you know what I mean? And we all can learn. And I think what helps me is just to do more research, like reading books, articles, podcasts, and really thinking through an idea. And it also helps to, like, be around people who have other ideas than me, or who have a knowledge to share. And it's like, oh, I learned from them. You know what I mean? Especially, like, my journey as a queer person in this world, like, it is that, like, in terms of when I realized that for me being queer was also about, like, being a part of queer communities, and so, like, actually hanging out with other people who are queer and making work with them and things like that. And then it's like, oh, I'm just, like, just more exposed to new ideas and more exposed to different ways of thinking. And then over time it becomes oh, I like, it's like a distant memory that I thought any differently, but I did think differently, you know, because I wasn't exposed to these things, so I didn't know. And I say that because I think within social justice circles, cancel culture, all of those things, it's like, well, why don't you know? It's like, we all don't know until we know, you know, like, knowing especially that the school system in particular, and the way the world and the media and everything is, like, implanted these ideas. For us to, like, change our minds is very possible, but, like, know that we've been given a tray of ideas already, you know what I mean? So it isn't even like, oh, we have to learn, not even, it's like we have to like remove things from the tray and put new things in the tray, as opposed to the tray being empty, you know? Like, so it's hard to do that. But I think it's possible. It's possible. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I don't want to act like I haven't been a trash human at times. I really have been. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, you know, seriously not above reproach, not above being called in. I can't, like,
Yeah.
I've fallen on my face, certainly. I've said things I shouldn't have said, behaved in ways I shouldn't have. I hope to do better, you know? I work on doing better, but, ciao, like.
I mean, that's all we can hope for. I feel like a lot of people, again, like with cancel culture and like carceral, I don't know.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Everyone's afraid of being like thrown out of the community.
Yes.
And part of being a community is like holding each other accountable and holding space for each other to grow, but also holding space for ourselves to grow too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even thinking of, you know, I didn't name any names in terms of the sort of celebrity activists and some people who've done some harm, you know what I mean, and it's been really hard. But even holding space for that, it does, for me, what I really think about, and I think about this as an example with thinking about Indigenous folks and some people who've been pretending to be Indigenous, the pretendians, you know what I mean, and me as a non-Indigenous person, my relationship to this idea. But it's like, it's worthy of examining because it's like, okay, yes, this person lied, but what was it about us collectively that we were so willing to believe them? You know what I mean? In terms of like, especially if they were like lighter skinned, white passing, and saying these things that we could kind of agree with. It's like, oh yeah, actually we have a collective responsibility. In addition to, yes, a person has done harm and needs to be held in account, but collectively we have to think about why did we hold that person up in esteem in a particular way? What was it about them? You know, that said that we wanted to listen to them so easily without questioning, you know? So it's, yeah, cancel culture, all those things. It's just like, as much as, yeah, an individual does harm, but they also do harm in a greater context. And so it is like, okay, yeah, this comes up so much, so many things, right? When we have one person who is a predator, as an example, then it's like, yeah, that person was a predator, but also the whole culture allowed it to continue, or made it so that people couldn't come forward, or didn't do anything to evaluate, you know, like there's a lot to be said. And so it's not necessarily always about the individual responsibility when people do harm. But I hear you. I think online especially things get very weird. It's not, you know, the best place. I think humans, and if you think of the evolution of humans and social media, you know, it's very, very new. So it's clunky. It's very awkward and strange the way people behave with this new technology that we have. So, yeah, people get very angry very quickly, you know? And it's just like, well, you're just like, wow, okay. And you know, I know for a fact some of those folks, if you actually had a conversation with them in person, it would be different. It just would be. Like, they still might be angry, but, like, at least you could have an exchange that wasn't immediately about casting somebody out. But then again, also, I don't believe in consequences, but also some people are just like, why are we giving this person a platform? Some people are just like, goodbye. Like, why? Like, why? Why do we care what you have to say again? You've achieved nothing. Or in the case of some people, okay, you achieved something 10 years ago and it's done now. Goodbye. Like, I don't know why we care what you have to say. Like, you're not furthering the conversation. Like, who even cares? You know, so you're not even worth people's time. And the fact is that, like, you know, the more we give those people the energy of saying, I hate you, is the more actually we're empowering them. Exactly. We're just like, why are we even bothering? That, for me, I'd love to see that as actual cancel culture, as in we stop even listening to what this person had to say. Like, what would that mean instead of the immediate reaction, and which are needed sometimes too, but also just like, bye. You know what I mean? Truly. Like, go away. Like, because and it's not go away in the sense of like, don't ever talk to anyone again, but it's just like, why are, like, you know, as a collective, as a society, you know, I wish for more of that. I wish for more mute buttons, you know? I wish for that. Anyway.
Wow.
What?
Well, we're at time.
Okay.
But thank you so much for being here and for, like, sharing your thoughts with us. This has been like an amazing conversation, and I've really enjoyed listening to you. I could do it forever. So we want to just like quickly check out, what are you going to do to take care of yourself today?
Oh, well, I'm going to get back on the go. Transit. Maybe the train. No, probably not the train, because I don't know if it's running. But I'm going to go back on the go bus and go home. And just have a quiet Friday.
So wonderful.
Yeah. I'm glad. I feel very blessed that I'm able, even within the capitalist society, to have like a day that's not very busy.
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. Bye.